Far beyond the edges of the Milky Way, the Galactic Empire ruled over thousands of star systems. For millennia, no force had challenged their reign. With technology far surpassing anything known to lesser civilizations, the empire's might seemed absolute. At the heart of the empire was the planet Cronus, a world of towering cities and vast industrial complexes. Here, the emperor and the High Council convened to govern their domain. In the grand hall of the Imperial Palace, a meeting was underway to discuss a matter of grave importance. "My lords," spoke Grand Admiral Zahn, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Our scouts have discovered a new species on the fringes of our territory. They call themselves humans." Murmurs rippled through the assembled counselors. "Humans?" scoffed one. "What a primitive name. Surely they are of no concern to us." Zahn raised a hand for silence. "Do not be so quick to dismiss them, Counselor Draz. While their technology is indeed primitive compared to our own, there is something unusual about them." The Emperor leaned forward on his throne, his ancient eyes glinting with interest. "Explain, Admiral." Zahn tapped a button on a console before him, and a holographic display flickered to life in the center of the hall. It showed a blue-green world orbiting a small yellow star. "This is their homeworld, a planet they call Earth. Our probes have detected signs of advanced industry and large population centers." The display zoomed in to show images of sprawling cities, bustling highways, and towering skyscrapers. The counselors leaned in for a closer look, some of them frowning. "They have achieved a global civilization," Zahn continued. "And while their space travel capabilities are still in their infancy, they show rapid advancements." The display changed to show human spacecraft, from primitive chemical rockets to sleek fusion-powered vessels. The counselors murmured again, this time with a hint of unease. "But that is not what concerns me most," Zahn said gravely. "It is their behavior. Our scouts have observed a level of aggression and competition between their nations that is disturbing." The display showed scenes of human warfare, from ancient battles with swords and spears to the devastating weapons of the 21st century. Mushroom clouds bloomed, cities burned, and soldiers clashed in brutal combat. The counselors recoiled, some of them gasping in shock. The Emperor's eyes narrowed. "They wage war upon themselves." Zahn nodded. "Constantly, Your Majesty. They seem to thrive on conflict, even as it threatens to destroy them. And yet, somehow, they continue to advance." The Emperor was silent for a long moment, contemplating the images before him. Finally, he spoke. "This is troubling indeed. A species with such potential, yet so prone to violence. They could prove a threat to the stability of our empire." Counselor Draz spoke up again. "Surely they are no match for our forces, Your Majesty. We could easily conquer them and put an end to their aggression." But the Emperor shook his head. "No, Counselor, we must be cautious. If these humans are as tenacious as they seem, an invasion could prove costly. For now, we will watch and wait. Let us see how they develop." He turned to Zahn. "Admiral, I want your best agents monitoring this Earth closely. Learn all you can about these humans, their strengths and weaknesses. We must be prepared for any eventuality." Zahn bowed deeply. "As you command, Your Majesty." As the meeting adjourned and the counselors dispersed, a sense of unease hung over the grand hall. The Galactic Empire had faced many challenges in its long history, but never one quite like this. The humans were an unknown quantity, a variable that could upset the balance of power in the galaxy. And so, the Empire watched and waited, keenly aware that the fate of their civilization might one day depend on the actions of a primitive species from the edge of known space. Only time would tell if the humans would prove to be allies, enemies, or something else entirely. As the Galactic Empire continued to monitor humanity from afar, a scout ship ventured closer to Earth than ever before. Its mission was to gather detailed information on the planet's defenses and assess the humans' capabilities. The ship, a sleek vessel named the Interceptor, was commanded by Captain Jax, one of the Empire's most skilled pilots. As they approached Earth's solar system, Jax couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. "I don't like this," he muttered to his first officer, a tall, slender alien named Rin. "We're getting too close. If the humans detect us..." Rin shook his head. "Our cloaking technology is perfect, Captain. They won't know we're here." But Jax wasn't convinced. He had studied the reports on human technology, and while it was primitive compared to the Empire's, it was advancing at an alarming rate. Who knew what they might be capable of? As they entered Earth's orbit, the interceptor sensors began to pick up strange readings. Jax frowned at the data scrolling across his screen. "What is that?" "Some kind of energy field." Rin leaned in for a closer look. "I've never seen anything like it. It's not in our database." Suddenly, an alarm blared through the ship. "Captain," cried the sensor officer, "we've been detected." Jax's eyes widened in shock. "That's impossible. Our cloak..." But before he could finish his sentence, a bright beam of energy lanced out from the planet's surface, striking the interceptor's hull. The ship shuddered violently, sparks flying from overloaded consoles. "Shields down to 50%. Rin shouted over the chaos. "We've lost main power." Jax gritted his teeth as he fought to regain control of the ship. "Evasive maneuvers. Get us out of here." The interceptor veered sharply, trying to escape the relentless barrage from below. But the humans' weapons were too accurate, too powerful. Another beam struck the ship, and alarms screamed as the hull breach warning flashed red. "We're losing atmosphere," Rin cried. "We have to abandon ship." Jax hesitated for a moment, his pride warring with his instinct for survival. But as another explosion rocked the interceptor, he knew there was no choice. "All hands, evacuate," he ordered over the ship-wide comm. "Get to the escape pods." The crew scrambled to obey, rushing to the pod bay as the ship continued to shudder and groan around them. Jax and Rin were the last to leave, sealing themselves into a small spherical pod just as the interceptor's hull finally gave way. From the tiny viewports of the escape pod, Jax watched in horror as his once proud ship broke apart, consumed by the unforgiving vacuum of space. The pod's systems came online, and he felt the lurch of the emergency thrusters firing, propelling them away from the destruction. As they sped away from Earth, Jax's mind raced with questions. How had the humans detected them? What kind of weapons were they using? And most importantly, what would the Empire do now that they knew the truth about humanity's capabilities? He knew one thing for certain: the High Council would not take this news well. The humans had just made a powerful enemy, one that would stop at nothing to assert its dominance over the galaxy. The escape pod carried Jax and his crew back to the safety of Imperial space, but the captain knew that this was only the beginning. The Empire would come for Earth, with all the might and fury of 1,000 star systems, and when they did, the humans would face a war unlike any they had ever known. As the pod disappeared into the depths of space, Earth continued to turn, its people unaware of the looming threat from above. The stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of the galaxy, one that would test the limits of human ingenuity and determination. The first contact between the Galactic Empire and humanity had been a disaster. But the true battle was yet to come. News of the Interceptor's defeat spread like wildfire through the Galactic Empire. The High Council was in an uproar, outraged that a primitive species like humanity could have inflicted such a humiliating blow. In the grand hall of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor sat upon his throne, his face a mask of cold fury. "This insult cannot stand," he declared, his voice ringing with authority. "The humans must be taught a lesson they will never forget." Grand Admiral Zahn stepped forward, bowing deeply. "Your Majesty, I have already begun preparations for a full-scale invasion of Earth. Our fleets are being mobilized as we speak." The Emperor nodded, pleased with Zahn's initiative. "Good. I want every available ship and soldier ready for battle." We will crush these upstarts and show them the true power of the Empire." As Zahn took his leave to oversee the war effort, the other counselors began to murmur amongst themselves. Some expressed doubts about the wisdom of an all-out attack on Earth, remembering the reports of human tenacity and resourcefulness. But the Emperor silenced them with a glare. "Do you question my decision, counselors? Do you doubt the strength of our empire?" The counselors quickly fell in line, not daring to voice their concerns. They knew that to defy the Emperor was to invite swift and terrible retribution. Meanwhile, in the shipyards and staging areas of a dozen star systems, the Empire's war machines sprang into action. Massive battleships, their hulls bristling with weapons, began to assemble into formation. Legions of heavily armed troops boarded transport ships, ready to storm the surface of Earth and bring its people to heel. At the head of this mighty armada was the Emperor's personal flagship, the Inexorable. A colossal vessel, it dwarfed even the largest of the Empire's other ships. Its sleek black hull seemed to absorb the very light around it, a fitting symbol of the Emperor's implacable will. On the bridge of the Inexorable, Grand Admiral Zahn stood before a holographic display of the Earth and its surrounding space. Red icons denoted the positions of the human defenses, pitifully few compared to the sea of green that represented the Imperial fleet. "This will be a swift victory," Zahn declared, his voice filled with confidence. "The humans are hopelessly outmatched. They will have no choice but to surrender." The other officers on the bridge nodded in agreement, eager to avenge the humiliation of the Interceptor's defeat. They had no doubt that the Empire's superior technology and vast numbers would overwhelm any resistance the humans could muster. As the fleet began its long journey towards Earth, the people of the Empire celebrated, confident in the knowledge that their invincible military would soon put the upstart humans in their place. In the streets of Cronus and 100 other worlds, crowds gathered to cheer the departing ships, waving flags and banners emblazoned with the Imperial crest. But there were some who watched the proceedings with a sense of unease. These were the veterans of the Empire's many wars, the old soldiers who had seen the true face of battle. They knew that victory was never certain, no matter how great the odds seemed to be in one's favor. And so, as the mighty fleet of the Galactic Empire set forth to conquer Earth, there were those who wondered if perhaps, just perhaps, they might have underestimated the humans once again. The stage was set for a war that would shake the galaxy to its core, a conflict that would test the mettle of both sides and determine the fate of countless worlds. The Empire had mobilized its forces, confident in its own strength and the weakness of its enemy. But the humans, for all their primitive technology and internal strife, had a way of defying expectations. The true test was yet to come, and only time would tell who would emerge victorious in the end. As the Galactic Empire's invasion fleet approached Earth, the humans were not entirely unaware of the impending threat. The strange energy readings and the destruction of the alien scout ship had put the planet's defenses on high alert. In command centers around the globe, military leaders and scientists worked feverishly to analyze the data they had gathered, trying to understand the nature of their enemy. They knew that they were facing a foe with technology far beyond their own, but they were determined to fight nonetheless. When the Imperial fleet finally arrived in Earth's solar system, it was met with a barrage of missiles and energy weapons from the planet's orbital defenses. The humans had pooled their resources, creating a network of satellites and space stations armed with the most advanced weapons they could muster. But against the might of the Empire, it was like throwing pebbles at a tidal wave. The Imperial ships shrugged off the attacks, their shields absorbing the impacts with barely a flicker. In response, they unleashed a devastating bombardment of their own, targeting the human defenses with ruthless precision. On the surface of Earth, people watched in horror as the sky above them lit up with the flashes of distant explosions. They knew that their last line of defense had fallen, and that the invasion was about to begin in earnest. The first wave of Imperial dropships descended through the atmosphere, their hulls glowing red-hot from the friction of re-entry. They landed in the heart of Earth's major cities, disgorging thousands of heavily armed troops onto the streets. The humans fought back with everything they had, from conventional firearms to improvised weapons cobbled together from whatever materials they could find. They set up barricades in the streets, turned buildings into fortresses, and met the invaders with a fierce resistance that surprised even the battle-hardened Imperial soldiers. But for all their bravery, the humans were simply outmatched. The Imperial troops were equipped with advanced armor and energy weapons that could cut through even the toughest defenses like a hot knife through butter. They advanced relentlessly, street by street and block by block, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. In the skies above, Imperial fighter craft dueled with human jets and helicopters, the advanced alien technology proving too much for the earthly machines. The humans fought valiantly, but they were slowly being pushed back, their numbers dwindling with each passing hour. On the bridge of the inexorable, Grand Admiral Zahn watched the progress of the invasion with satisfaction. The human resistance was crumbling, just as he had predicted. It would only be a matter of time before Earth was completely under Imperial control. But even as he savored the taste of victory, Zahn couldn't shake a nagging sense of unease. The humans were fighting with a tenacity and resourcefulness that he had never seen before, even in the most battle-hardened of the Empire's foes. They seemed to possess a spirit, a will to fight, that went beyond mere survival instinct. As the invasion ground on, the humans continued to surprise the Imperial forces. They launched daring raids behind enemy lines, striking at supply depots and communication hubs. They used the terrain to their advantage, luring the invaders into ambushes and traps. And they never, ever gave up, even in the face of overwhelming odds. Slowly but surely, the Imperial advance began to falter. The human resistance was growing stronger, bolstered by the knowledge that they were fighting not just for their own lives, but for the very future of their species. They were learning, adapting, finding ways to turn the Empire's own technology against them. And so, as the battle for Earth raged on, the outcome was no longer as certain as it had once seemed. The Galactic Empire had come to conquer, confident in its own invincibility. But the humans had shown that they were not so easily beaten, that they possessed a strength and determination that could not be quantified by mere numbers or technology. The war for Earth had only just begun, and already it had taken on a significance far beyond the fate of a single planet. It had become a symbol, a rallying cry for all those who dared to defy the might of the Empire. And in the hearts of the humans, a new hope was born, the hope that they might not just survive, but triumph against the odds. The hope that they might forge a new future for themselves among the stars. As the battle for Earth dragged on, the human resistance began to gain momentum. The Galactic Empire, for all its advanced technology and vast resources, found itself bogged down in a grinding war of attrition. The humans had adapted to the Imperial tactics, learning to exploit weaknesses in their armor and weapons. They had reverse-engineered captured technology, using it to augment their own defenses and strike back at the invaders with ever-increasing effectiveness. In the ruins of Earth's cities, small bands of human fighters launched guerrilla attacks against Imperial supply lines and outposts. They hit hard and fast, then melted away into the rubble before the enemy could respond. Each successful raid bolstered the morale of the resistance, proving that the invaders were not invincible. The Empire, frustrated by its inability to quell the human uprising, resorted to ever more brutal tactics. They bombed civilian targets, hoping to break the will of the population. They rounded up prisoners and subjected them to harsh interrogations, seeking to uncover the secrets of the resistance. But the more the Empire tightened its grip, the more the humans slipped through its fingers. The very brutality of the Imperial occupation only served to harden the resolve of the resistance, driving more and more people to take up arms against the invaders. As the war entered its second year, the tide began to turn in favor of the humans. A series of daring offensives, coordinated by the resistance leadership, struck deep into Imperial-held territory. Human forces, bolstered by captured Imperial weapons and equipment, were able to go toe-to-toe with the invaders in open battle. In the skies above Earth, human pilots, flying jury-rigged spacecraft cobbled together from scavenged parts, took the fight to the Imperial fleet. They used their small size and agility to their advantage, darting in and out of the massive enemy formations, inflicting damage and disrupting their operations. On the ground, human infantry units, armed with a mix of conventional weapons and captured Imperial technology, launched a series of surprise attacks on key Imperial strongholds. They used their knowledge of the terrain and their guerrilla tactics to outmaneuver the invaders, striking hard and then fading away before the enemy could mount an effective response. The Galactic Empire, its forces stretched thin and its supply lines under constant attack, began to falter. The human resistance, once dismissed as a mere nuisance, had grown into a formidable fighting force, capable of taking on the Imperial military head-on. In the command centers of the resistance, the human leaders watched with growing hope as their forces pushed the invaders back, mile by hard-fought mile. They knew that the road ahead would be long and bloody, but for the first time since the invasion began, they allowed themselves to believe that victory might be possible. On the bridge of the inexorable, Grand Admiral Zahn watched the tide of battle turn against him with growing frustration and disbelief. He had come to Earth expecting a swift and easy victory, but instead found himself mired in a brutal war that seemed to have no end. As reports of human victories continued to pour in, Zahn felt a growing sense of unease. He had underestimated the humans, dismissing them as primitive savages unworthy of the Empire's attention. Now he was beginning to realize the magnitude of his mistake. But even as the Empire's grip on Earth began to slip, Zahn knew that he could not afford to show weakness. The Galactic Emperor was not known for his forgiveness of failure, and Zahn had staked his reputation and his very life on the success of the invasion. And so, even as the human resistance grew stronger and more emboldened with each passing day, the Empire continued to fight, pouring more and more resources into the battle for Earth. The war had become a matter of pride and principle for the Imperial leadership, a test of their will and their ability to bend the galaxy to their desires. But as the conflict dragged on, it became increasingly clear that the Empire had bitten off more than it could chew. The humans, once dismissed as mere primitives, had proven themselves to be a force to be reckoned with, a species with an indomitable will and a fierce determination to defend their home at any cost. The war for Earth had become a symbol of something larger, a struggle for freedom and self-determination in the face of an oppressive galactic order. And as the humans continued to fight and die for their cause, they knew that the outcome of the battle would have consequences that would echo across the stars for generations to come. As the war on Earth entered its third year, the Galactic Empire found itself in an increasingly untenable position. The human resistance had grown from a ragtag collection of guerrilla fighters into a well-organized and highly effective military force. Across the planet, Imperial outposts and supply depots fell to lightning raids by human strike teams. The invaders, once confident in their ability to crush any resistance, now found themselves constantly on the defensive, struggling to maintain their grip on the territory they had conquered. In space, the Imperial fleet, once thought invincible, was under constant harassment by human spacecraft. The small, agile ships, piloted by daring and resourceful human pilots, darted in and out of the massive Imperial formations, inflicting damage and disrupting their operations. On the ground, human infantry units, now armed with a mix of captured Imperial technology and their own innovative weapon systems, launched increasingly bold attacks on the invaders. They used their knowledge of the terrain and their mastery of unconventional tactics to keep the Imperial forces off balance and on the back foot. In the Imperial command centers, the mood was one of growing desperation and despair. The Galactic Empire, for all its vast resources and advanced technology, found itself struggling to contain the human insurgency. The war, once thought to be a quick and easy victory, had become a quagmire that was draining the Empire's resources and eroding its prestige. Grand Admiral Zahn, the architect of the invasion, found himself under increasing pressure from the Imperial leadership to bring the war to a swift and decisive conclusion. But as the human resistance grew stronger and more effective with each passing day, Zahn began to realize that victory might no longer be possible. In a series of tense meetings with his subordinates, Zahn grappled with the reality of the situation. The Empire could continue to pour resources into the war, but at what cost? The longer the conflict dragged on, the more damage it would do to the Empire's reputation and its ability to maintain control over its other subject worlds. And so, with a heavy heart, Zahn made the decision to begin a phased withdrawal from Earth. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but he knew that it was the only way to salvage what was left of the Empire's dignity and prevent the war from spiraling out of control. The news of the Empire's retreat was met with jubilation by the human resistance. In cities and towns across the planet, people took to the streets to celebrate what they saw as the beginning of the end of the occupation. But the human leaders knew that the war was far from over. The Empire might be withdrawing from Earth, but it still controlled vast swaths of the galaxy. If humanity was to have any hope of long-term survival, it would need to take the fight to the Empire on its own turf. And so, even as the Imperial forces began to pull back from Earth, the human resistance was already making plans for the next phase of the war. They knew that they would need to build alliances with other species that had been oppressed by the Empire, and that they would need to develop new weapons and technologies to take on the Imperial military head-on. The road ahead would be long and hard, but the humans had already proven that they were a force to be reckoned with. They had stood up to the most powerful empire in the galaxy and had come out on top. They had shown that they had the will and the determination to fight for their freedom, no matter the odds. And as the Empire's ships began to lift off from the surface of Earth, the human fighters watched them go with a sense of pride and purpose. They knew that the war was entering a new phase, but they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The Galactic Empire might have underestimated the humans, but it would not make that mistake again. The war for the galaxy had only just begun, and the humans were determined to see it through to the end, no matter the cost. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear: the universe would never be the same again. With the Galactic Empire in retreat, the human resistance wasted no time in pressing its advantage. The leaders of the movement knew that they could not afford to rest on their laurels, not when the fate of their species hung in the balance. In secret meetings and encrypted communications, the human commanders began to lay the groundwork for a bold new strategy. They would take the fight to the Empire, striking at its heart and its most valuable assets. They would show the galaxy that humanity was not just a minor irritant to be swatted aside, but a force to be reckoned with. The first step was to build alliances with other species that had been oppressed by the Empire. The humans reached out to the leaders of these groups, offering them support and resources in exchange for their cooperation. Many were hesitant at first, wary of the humans' intentions and fearful of the Empire's retribution. But as word of the humans' victories on Earth began to spread, more and more of these groups came on board, eager to join the fight against their common enemy. With their new allies in Tau, the humans began to launch a series of daring raids on Imperial outposts and supply lines. They struck hard and fast, using their knowledge of Imperial tactics and their own innovative strategies to catch the enemy off guard. They targeted key infrastructure, such as shipyards and communication hubs, hoping to disrupt the Empire's ability to wage war and maintain control over its subject worlds. At first, the Empire was slow to respond, still reeling from its defeat on Earth and struggling to adapt to the new reality of the war. But as the human raids began to take their toll, the Imperial leadership knew that it could not afford to sit back and let the insurgency spread unchecked. Grand Admiral Zahn, now tasked with defending the Empire's interests across the galaxy, launched a massive counteroffensive against the human-led alliance. He brought the full might of the Imperial military to bear, hoping to crush the rebellion before it could gain further momentum. But the humans and their allies were ready for him. They had spent months preparing for this moment, stockpiling weapons and supplies, and training their forces in the art of asymmetric warfare. They knew that they could not hope to match the Empire's firepower head-on, but they could use their agility and resourcefulness to keep the enemy off balance and on the defensive. In a series of lightning strikes, the human-led forces hit the Empire where it was weakest, targeting its supply lines, its communication networks, and its command and control centers. They used hit-and-run tactics, striking hard and then melting away before the Imperial forces could mount an effective response. The Empire, for all its vast resources and advanced technology, found itself struggling to keep up with the pace of the insurgency. Its forces were spread thin, trying to defend far-flung outposts and protect vital assets from attack. Its supply lines were under constant threat, and its ability to coordinate and respond to the human-led offensive was severely hampered. As the war dragged on, the human-led alliance began to gain the upper hand. They had built a network of support and cooperation that stretched across the galaxy, and they were using it to great effect. They had the momentum, and they were determined to press their advantage until the Empire was finally brought to its knees. On the bridge of his flagship, Grand Admiral Zahn watched the tide of the war turn against him with a growing sense of despair. He had underestimated the humans once before, and it had cost him dearly. Now, he was facing the consequences of that mistake on a galactic scale. But even as the Empire's grip on the galaxy began to slip, Zahn knew that he could not afford to give up. He had sworn an oath to defend the Empire, and he would fulfill that duty to the bitter end. He would fight on, no matter the odds, no matter the cost. And so, the war for the galaxy entered a new and even more brutal phase, as the Empire and the human-led alliance clashed in a series of increasingly desperate battles. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear: the universe had been forever changed by the rise of humanity, and nothing would ever be the same again. As the war between the Galactic Empire and the human-led alliance reached its climax, the very fabric of the galaxy seemed to tremble under the weight of the conflict. Across countless worlds, the two sides clashed in a series of increasingly desperate and brutal battles, each seeking to strike a decisive blow against the other. For the Empire, the stakes could not have been higher. Its very existence was now in jeopardy, threatened by an insurgency that had grown from a minor irritant into an existential threat. The Imperial leadership knew that it could not afford to lose this war, not if it hoped to maintain its grip on the galaxy and its claim to supremacy. But for the humans and their allies, the stakes were just as high. They were fighting not just for their own survival, but for the freedom and self-determination of countless species across the galaxy. They knew that if they failed, the Empire would not hesitate to exact a terrible revenge upon them, and all who had dared to challenge its rule. As the war entered its final stages, the Empire made one last desperate gamble. It gathered the bulk of its remaining forces and launched a massive assault on the human-led alliance's main base of operations. The Imperial fleet, still vast and powerful despite the losses it had suffered, descended upon the rebel stronghold like a hammer, determined to crush the insurgency once and for all. But the humans and their allies were ready for them. They had fortified their defenses and stockpiled their weapons, knowing that this moment would come. And when the Imperial forces arrived, they were met with a wall of fire and steel that they could not break through. The battle raged for days, with both sides suffering heavy casualties. The Empire threw everything it had at the rebel defenses, from massive battleships to elite ground troops. But the humans and their allies held firm, fighting with a tenacity and a determination that the Empire had never seen before. In the end, it was the Empire that was forced to retreat, its forces battered and broken, its pride shattered beyond repair. The human-led alliance had won a stunning victory, one that would be remembered for generations to come. In the aftermath of the battle, the leaders of the Empire and the alliance met to negotiate an end to the war. The Empire, its power and prestige now in tatters, had no choice but to sue for peace. The humans and their allies, flush with victory but weary of the long years of fighting, were ready to bring the conflict to an end. The peace treaty that emerged from those negotiations was a historic one. It recognized the right of all species to self-determination and freedom from imperial rule. It established a new galactic order, one based on cooperation and mutual respect, rather than domination and oppression. But even as the galaxy celebrated the end of the war and the dawn of a new era, there were those who looked to the future with unease. The Empire, though beaten, was not destroyed. It still controlled vast swathes of territory and possessed immense resources, and it had learned a bitter lesson from its defeat at the hands of the humans. As the Imperial delegation prepared to depart from the peace negotiations, Grand Admiral Zahn delivered a final warning to the leaders of the human-led alliance. "You have won this war," he said, his voice heavy with the weight of defeat. "But do not think that this is the end. The Empire will not forget what has happened here. We will rebuild, we will rearm, and we will return. And when we do, we will not make the same mistake of underestimating you again." With those words, the Empire withdrew to its core systems, its once mighty fleets now reduced to a shadow of their former selves. But even in defeat, it remained a force to be reckoned with, a reminder of the dangers that still lurked in the shadows of the galaxy. For the humans and their allies, the road ahead was still long and uncertain. They had won a great victory, but they knew that the struggle for a just and peaceful galaxy was far from over. They would need to remain vigilant, to continue to build alliances and strengthen their defenses, and to be ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. But for now, at least they could savor the sweet taste of victory, and the knowledge that they had forever changed the course of galactic history. The rise of humanity had shaken the very foundations of the universe, and nothing would ever be the same again.